Right, good evening. It's 6:30 and I shall commence the meeting. We'll start off with a bit of housekeeping. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and side of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Also, please note that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet. And please can I ask all members and members of the public to switch off their phones or turn them to silence. For the benefit of the members of the public attending, I would like to explain who everybody is around this table. My name is Councillor Anne Court and I'm the chairman of this committee for this evening only. Down the sides of the table to the left and to the right are the councillors who sit on this committee and who will be making the decision on the applications this evening. Immediately to my left and right are the officers who will be advising the councillors. Along the back under the windows are those councillors who are not on the committee but have asked to present their views. That is, if I can see any. As well as additional officers who may be called upon to help councillors. In addition, I would like to explain that the Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee and not a political meeting. The committee will be looking at the evidence brought before us tonight and will make a decision based on planning reasons. We are guided by national and local planning guidance and policy. I understand that planning can be emotive and ask that everyone remains polite and professional throughout the evening. May I ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and return to their seats once their presentation is complete. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. May I ask all committee members to avoid repetition and ask members to keep any comments on each item to a maximum of 4 minutes. Before I go any further, just like to announce that item 2, which is the planning application relating to Herriot's Farm, Fair Oak Lane, Stratfield Say, has been deferred, so it will not be before us this evening. So if anybody's come, you won't be able to hear it tonight. Item 1 is apologies for absence and substitutions. Councillor Sherlock has sent his apologies and has been substituted by Councillor Leeks. Councillor Tomlin sends his apologies and has been substituted by Councillor Bierman. And Councillor Hood has sent his apologies. I've not been advised of any substitution. The next item on our agenda is that we have to elect a vice chair for this meeting only. And I would propose Councillor Marilyn Tucker. That's seconded. Thank you. Right, whilst Councillor Mrs. Tucker comes up here, do we have any declarations of interest? No? Lovely. Item 3, urgent items. I've not been advised of any. Item 4, minutes of the committee meetings held on the 16th of June, which you were apparently emailed yesterday, but there are hard copies available. Shall we deal with them one at a time? Is everybody happy with the minutes of the 16th of June? All agreed? Yep. Minutes of the 25th of June. All agreed? Agreed. And then the minutes of the 2nd of July, which is the last ordinary DC meeting. Everybody agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Right, we then move on to item 5, applications for planning permission. And the first item, item 1, Meadowview Caravan Site, I will ask the officer to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. This was an application that was previously considered at committee in May, but was deferred by the committee for 2 reasons. One, that an independent review of the status of the applicants, and secondly, to seek advice on how the site can accommodate the provision of 3 mobile homes, 3 touring caravans, together with the numbers of parking vehicles that can be parked on site and also turn in. So in response to point 1, we've sought the independent review of the information, and this was carried out by Mr. Jeff Scrutton, and this is summarised in the officer's report as part of the actual agenda papers, and it's in front of the May committee. And also there's an Appendix A which has more details about his findings, and his conclusion is that both Lucy and Lance Hamlin are both gypsies within the definition of the planning policy and traveller sites. Just for some background information, Jeff Scrutton works for Basingstoke Borough Council, and he works with the gypsy and traveller communities, but we would not normally use him for commenting on planning applications. That's something that Hampshire County Council's gypsy liaison officer does. But in this instance, because of his experience and because of the request from the committee to have an independent view of the information, he's assessed the submitted information and he's interviewed the applicants, and his findings are, as I said before, that they do have gypsy status. If I could just bring to your attention the update paper. We've received via email from a Mr. Ian Donoghue, who's representing the objectors, a letter, and also Council's opinion in terms of the officer's report. The officer has addressed those points there in the update. The officer's report remains for approval.
Thank you. We have no public speakers on this item. They apparently all spoke at the last meeting, from which it was deferred. We have no local ward member, so we go. Any questions to officers? Councillor Godison.
Thank you, Chair. Sue Tarvey did actually use the word independent twice. Well, I have every respect for Mr. Scrutton. I'm not sure we could really describe him as an independent opinion as he works for the council. I think when we looked at this last time, we thought we were asking for an independent, for somebody completely independent to give a view on whether these were legitimate gypsies and travellers. But I would suggest that it's a bit misleading to call him independent. With all respect to him. Thank you.
No answer to that.
I mean, I would say he's as independent as I am as an officer of the council, so I give an independent view to you as members of the committee.
Any other questions? Councillor Potter.
I mean, really on the same tack, but it just seems to me perhaps you could, I mean, expressing your view, I guess, as well, but it seems to me the questions and analysis that Mr. Scrutton has made is pretty comprehensive, and I would fail to see how any other third party could ask questions very different to those that he has asked and establish answers based on those questions. It seems to be a critique that's as full as it can be. I mean, would you agree with me?
Yes, I would, yes.
No other questions? We'll move to debate. Councillor Mrs. Tucker.
Thank you. Actually, it's part question, part debate. I know that there are a number of people who are really concerned about the adjacent paddock, and in the future whether that could finish up with mobile homes on it as well. I wonder if the officers could help on that.
It's like with any other planning application, we have to deal with it on its merits as and when it comes in. So if that were to happen, then we will deal with it in exactly the same way.
Anybody else? Councillor Mr. Taylor.
I just feel I need to start the discussion here, really. I appreciate Mr. Scrutton's decision about the gypsy status, although I do question that still, because I think in the face of officer colleagues recommending approval, I think the impartiality is slightly suspect. But what I hadn't appreciated at the last meeting when we discussed this was that the applicant's own representatives, for the purpose of the previous appeal, had said, and I quote, as her children had not travelled to make their living nomadically, they were not considered to come within the definition. And so I think we have got somebody who's not only independent, but would almost be on the other side, actually saying that they don't live nomadically. And so I would therefore again question the status of these two people to have homes on this particular site. I have other concerns as well. And obviously this site isn't within an SPB, and so it constitutes development in the countryside, and it's not in line with our own policy D6. And I'm very aware that last month, a family who'd lived in a village for many, many years with a large plot of land would have loved their children to move onto their plot of land, and we very reluctantly had to say no to that one. And so in the interests of fairness and consistency in our decision making, we have to look really closely at that aspect of this particular case. It is, of course, according to our own transport team, it's not in a sustainable location. I note that the officers quote policy E1 in their recommendation for approval. I can't see how this proposal in any sense can meet our policy E1 and any of its 7 subparagraphs, and I've looked closely at policy E1. The only slight thing is that it doesn't directly overhang the neighbour's property, so I can see that. But apart from that, it's in no way does it meet E1 or E6. And of course, that's the landscape one, and of course our own landscape team is recommending refusal. And so I am erring towards refusal on this one. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to say anything? Anybody else wish to move something? Councillor Potter.
I mean, I'm trying to remember entirely the discussion that took place some months ago, but I think it's fair to say that, akin to the points that Councillor Taylor's raised, we had a fairly full and open discussion on all of those issues. My remembrance of that, and I think the minutes confirm this, is that we were satisfied in regard to most, if not all of those issues, except that we really had some doubt about the status of the occupants, hence the independent report being called for. And we had some concerns about the actual provision of the 3 mobile homes and touring caravans and the space and all of that. Again, those were the areas I thought we'd been left with. And my own subjective view at that time was, had it not been for that, again, subjective, we would have granted approval. My position is I think those constraints have now been satisfied. I think I declared my position originally. I would certainly move approval of this application.
Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would agree with Councillor Potter. I mean, that is my recollection of the meeting last time. I did say at the time when it was deferred that how many opinions are we going to get before we decide the status of these particular this particular people. And again, we've got, as far as the borough are concerned, an independent an opinion which backs up what came out last time, and we have something from the objectors. And I think this could go on and on forever with people not agreeing with one side or the other. My view last time was that it should have been approved, and I haven't changed.
Is that seconded? It's seconded. Councillor Mr Taylor?
Yes, in view of the fact that we have the applicant's own representative stating that these 2 applicants, the people who are going to occupy, aren't gypsies and don't have that status, I would like to move refusal for the opposite reason. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Frankham?
I think it is a difficult one, but I think were we to refuse it and it went to appeal, and we've got independent, how independent is a matter for people's thoughts. I think we would probably have a problem, so I will go with approval.
It's been moved and seconded for approval. Should we take that first? All those in favour of approval, please show. All those against? I'll ask the officers to confirm that decision, please.
That planning permission be granted.
Right, we now move on to item number 3, which is WT Burden Limited 2-4 Brick Kiln Industrial Estate. And we have some public participation on that. Could I ask Mrs. Beadle to come forward to the table whilst the officer introduces the application?
This application is for the erection of a storage building with external racking to the north, south and east elevations. Members recently viewed the site, that's reported in the update report. In addition, you'll see that we've had some comments in from Tadley Town Council, who have raised no objection to the proposal to the latest set of amended plans, which showed the proposed parking layout and turning areas. We've received one further letter of objection from a neighbour who has previously objected, but those points are summarised in the update report. In addition, there's been some further correspondence from the agent in response to questions we've asked about existing racking on the site, and they've confirmed it's intended to retain that racking. In addition, they've also made some comments on the officer's report and tried to respond to some of the consultations and public observations. The recommendation is for approval as per the officer's report.
Thank you. Mrs. Beadle, you have up to 4 minutes, and if you put your light on there.
Thank you. Thank you. I've just been presented with 4 pages of amendments at the meeting, and obviously I can't respond to those because I haven't even had the chance to read through them, and they are in response to a number of our concerns. And I can see, just looking at them, a number of the statements are just totally untrue, and they can be absolutely evidenced. The lighting is still directed at 16. A number of new floodlights have been erected, and the response we had from the chairman when he did come to visit this committee minute in February that Elliott's agreed to listen, engage and consult with neighbours on this application, on this warehouse that had been withdrawn from the last application. He did visit the southern and eastern boundary. We showed him the issues, and his response was the company line that the Fareham residents, a year after Elliott's opened there, were told. He said, quite frankly, we have a business to run, and that was his response to our concerns, which are extremely major. With regard to loss of amenity, this is the 4th different application to the council in 6 months in respect of Elliott's tenancy. Given the planning history, permission has specifically been granted for light industrial use on the site, and units are currently advertised for rent. The last industrial unit was granted permission in 1987 with 11 conditions, many of which remain applicable, but they cannot be imposed as the permission was not implemented. It was acknowledged at that time that the unit could be used for builders' storage, and it could be returned for light industrial use when no longer required. A certificate of lawfulness was granted in November 2013 for Elliott's, but regardless of the certificate of lawfulness, the application is contrary to Tadley District Centre and Employment Area brief supplementary document, where the council summed up direct comments from planning, RPS planning on behalf of Sainsbury's and Stacey's, who agreed that heavy and noisy industrial use is not compatible given the nature of the site and surrounding land use, and where possible larger industrial warehouses would be best placed elsewhere. And the site owner has placed these industries at that time up the road, half a mile away on the same road at their White House farm estate. The application's contrary to the indicative plan sent to Michael Townsend, D316 land between Mulford's Hill and Silchester Road for the remaining area of the land, and where it was stated operation of these units is not entirely suitable, and it's contrary to Basingstoke and Dean's Local Plan 96/2011, where it was for mixed use development retail residential, and it's a safe policy for residential. The plans do not show the north-east residential boundaries accurately, the full length of the vegetation plan, etc., etc. There were a number of errors. The planning officer's report omits material planning history, the 3-metre acoustic fence, which was part of works to have a noise abatement notice lifted, and this operation is far, far worse, and it is specifically based on the east boundary. I have Arctics, they have not at all used the vehicle movement plan they submitted last November, and also the display of illuminated signs is omitted from planning history. It is a total nightmare. The residents are aware of the amenity. They've lived there over well over 150 years between us, their families.
Your time is up. Can you sum up in one quick sentence, please?
Nothing's been built into the design to mitigate the detrimental impact, and please can conditions be put on to impose the vehicle movement plan, provide appropriate screening and barrier for health and safety reasons, and the roofscape of the building be brown, and also the warehouse, there isn't sufficient turning space for the Arctics.
I'm sorry, you have gone over the time.
Sorry.
I might pick up in a minute if you get questions. Any
you.
questions, members? Councillor Leeks.
I was wondering if you could confirm on there where you live so that our other members can see it, and also basically tonight we are looking at the building as opposed to the racking near you. Will the building, do you think, have an adverse effect on you, the new building? Sorry.
Yes, I live at sorry, they changed the number 16. Sorry, number 16, which is on the right hand. Number 16, and on the plan it doesn't show the.
Is that right? Where the pin's pointing?
Yes, it is, and you can see how long the east residential boundary is. The mature Scots pine and that is not shown. They've only shown two bits of the two bits of the vegetation, and also the boundary is inaccurate on the north and east there. It goes right to the side of my drive, so the site is actually nearer than that plan shows. And the building will materially affect us in so much as they applied for racking, but they've put that up anyway, 2 enormous rows of racking. Everything has been put adjacent to 16 bungalow, and the noise of the additional working with the forklifts, etc., and the additional storage capacity of the warehouse. And the warehouse is just against just about everything that's ever been written in Tadley, and it's very, very well documented, this site, because of the Sainsbury's superstore, where part of the site was actually developed in conjunction with the Sainsbury's superstore.
Councillor Beerman.
Thank you. I just appreciate it because that's a bit fuzzy, and I was trying to look at it more closely on my plan and I've not found it yet. Which direction is your property orientated? In other words, is it your back garden against the fence, or is it the side?
This is the problem. It is the side of the property, and from the main living areas, I can, the men look over the fence, the rack on top of the racking, and because of the racking, all the sound has been now elevated up as well.
But would it be fair to say that what's happening on the racking has nothing to do with the proposed new building, and therefore it's not going to be detrimentally affected? They applied for racking. They were going to put it down the entire east boundary.
solid wood 6-metre racking, and they were advised by the planning officer, this was back in February, that they would be unlikely to get that. So they've changed the application, withdrew the racking and the warehouse, which is now before you today, but they've put up additional racking as well, which is huge. So really, we had a noise issue before. There was no protection for the little bungalow at 16, and the noise issue, I mean, it is horrendous, absolutely horrendous there.
It strikes me that you're looking at lighting and noise, but that they are not part of this. As far as I can see, I'm not seeing how it links in with the building that's being proposed. I don't know.
One of my issues is they've submitted a vehicle movement plan, and they have massive Arctics, HGVs and forklifts with burdens. They used to load once a day and be off site the day, come back, load in the afternoon, park the other side at the operating centre, which Elliott's can't actually use because it blocks the warehouse, and they've only been granted an interim licence, and go out and then come back. So although there were more lorries, they were out most of the day. The warehouse impacts us because the vehicle movement plan has not been implemented. They've been running a snack bar in the staff car parking area and the staff park outside, and the lorries just simply can't turn. These are enormous Arctics, hence they either back up or go forward just behind my garage overlooking our house, or they go in where the warehouse is. You see the bit that goes in on the east boundary, and that's where the vehicles pull up because of the size. It's the number and the size of these vehicles. If they would implement the vehicle movement plan, if it's physically possible, but I don't think it is, and it's the warehouse is just another thing to increase the noise that's already a problem. The forklifts with burdens, to go on, but the forklifts with burdens at the side of 16 Bungalow in their movement plan that was submitted to the council and approved, that was a slow moving area where I have HGVs and forklifts charging around directly towards number 16. It's really a noise issue with the building, apart from the fact it is absolutely huge. It's bigger than anything else on site. It completely changes the nature of what is a light industrial estate, regardless of the certificate of lawfulness.
Councillor Potter?
Hello. Well, obviously, as Councillor Leeks has pointed out, I think, our discussions this evening, consideration is very limited. It has to be in respect of the storage unit that is being applied for. In my own view, nothing else really, because clearly some of the things that you're talking about relate to somebody living in a residential area adjacent to an industrial estate, and it comes from that. But as we understood it, and what we heard on site was that nothing additional was going to happen in regard to the racking units that exist. They're not going to be increased in height or in dimension in any way. And in regard to the storage unit, the advice we had was that that was to provide storage for dry timber, a dry storage area. So really what you've got now, but placed under cover. And that was it, really. So in terms of where the unit is going to be placed in relation to your garden area, it seems to me, subjectively, to be quite far away from that. It's difficult to see how that would impact upon you in your house. Can you explain that a little better to me?
It's the size of it. It can be clearly seen and overlooked, especially with their livery. I can clearly see the warehouse that they've already redone. It's a smaller area yard than Burden, so that warehouse will be brought right forward to the boundary. And really, it's the stacking and everything is being directed to the east boundary.
Sorry, my minimal understanding there. In regard to the movement of the timber and other dry material that's going to be stored there, that presumably is moved on a regular basis within the site now by forklift trucks and other appropriate units within the site. The activity level wouldn't change, but the storage would be within a unit. As I understand it, that's the only change, isn't it?
The storage unit would increase the capacity of the site tremendously because of the size. I mean, it's a massive unit. It's not, I mean, it's a massive industrial unit, not suitable for residential area and against everything here. But it also has racking on the three sides of it as well. So it's a noise, it can be clearly seen. And it reduces the turning area of these lorries, which in practical terms, in very real terms, are not operated in accordance with the movement plan that has been submitted.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Taylor.
Thank you very much. I obviously appreciate that it's not just your house that we're looking at. There's several people who've objected and they're all around the perimeter, aren't they? I wasn't at the viewing, so I didn't have the benefit of hearing what the applicants had to say. But it does say on the update sheet that its siting has been determined following public consultation with residents. Were you part of that consultation, and would you agree that this siting is roughly in line with what was said at the consultation?
It is roughly in the consultation, but what happens, they were advised by planning that they would not get planning permission. It would be unlikely they get planning permission for this unit where it was last positioned. So they invited the residents to a presentation which was very one-sided. And then the residents of the east and south boundaries invited the chairman to view it from our garden so he could see the impact of these 6 metre stacks. I mean, and the warehouse will obviously be, you know, that's nearly 8 metres high, and the resulting impact, you know, that brings with the noise, etc. It was minuted. If they brought anything else forward at this meeting in February, if they brought anything else forward, they were asked to listen, engage, listen, consult with residents, and they have not, and they have refused. They're not consulting at all with the warehouse. One of the this committee in the past there's been a height limit on the, because it is a residential area, there's been a height limit on the units, and there are other residential units available for rent on the site, but they want something that's totally out of keeping and totally against all these policies on the site. They're turning into a very industrial estate. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Tucker.
First of all, I want to apologise because I think you thought we were going viewing to come into your garden and see it across, and I do apologise, but we ran out of time because people had to get back for various meetings. So first of all, I want to say that what we have got, and I think you have forwarded, is some photographs taken from your garden of the racks and things and lorries on the other side. Is that correct?
Yes, they're just an example of what is being experienced, because, as the residents will tell you, this is a very serious scale operation. It's a £45 million turnover operation, and it is huge.
Now, I wonder if you can clarify something. You're talking about the vehicle movement plan. Is that the one that's been submitted for this particular application or a previous one? I'm a bit confused.
The vehicle movement plan was submitted with the last application. It was resubmitted with this application and then amended on the 1st of July to increase the car parking within the site, which has still not been used within the site, from 29 to 35 spaces. 3 of those car parking spaces are in what has been submitted to the traffic commissioner as the operating centre. So all HGVs are supposed to park in that area when they're not in operation, and the planning officer took, when she came out to view, she could see usually in the afternoons when they're not busy, because this operation only started on 31st of March. They're parked up next to the racking with their jibs fully extended, adjacent to number 16. And also, if they're parked up, which they are at night, they totally block, that's the formerly known as Unit 2, they totally block the doorway, so they can't be parked there at all during the day. So, yeah, I mean, it really is an issue. I mean, if it worked, but yes, it is the same plan, but it was amended on 1st of July.
Any more questions? No? Thank you. Ask Paul Cleary to come forward, please. You also have up to 4 minutes.
A long one. Okay, is that okay? Thank you. Good evening. My name's Paul Cleary. I'm the sales director for Elliott Brothers, the builders merchants currently trading from the WT Burden site. We are an independent family-run builders merchants, and we have 9 branches throughout Hampshire. We were delighted to be able to open a branch in Tadley, particularly as it was on a site that was a previous builders merchants and is on a long-established industrial estate. We look forward to being part of the local community, as we have been at many of our other branches, particularly Ringwood, Fordingbridge, Totton, Romsey and Bishop's Waltham. We currently employ 13 staff at Tadley, 11 of which are from the local surrounding area. Our planning application is for a storage building and external racking positioned in the centre of the yard to enable us to stock a range of products such as plaster, plasterboard, sheet materials and prepared timber. We currently hold a small range of these products in our existing warehouse, but need regular deliveries to top up this stock. We know by keeping larger stocks of these products, we will cut down the number of repeat deliveries and lorry movements on the site. The new building is proposed to be hidden on 3 sides by racking that will store our current stocks of sawn timber. This will soften the visual aspect of the building and enable us to site the timber racks well away from the residential boundaries. It is pleasing to read the planning report, in the planning report, that the planning officer, Anne Wilkinson, is recommending the application, and that the proposed development would be of an appropriate design and relates to the surrounding development in a sympathetic manner, and as such complies with the national planning framework, and it would not result in any adverse impact on the surrounding residential properties. We believe we have taken into consideration the views and concerns of the local residents. After a meeting with the neighbours back in January of this year, we took on board their concerns and drastically altered our original proposal for the new building. At the same time, we redesigned the layout of the yard and moved the racking, which was proposed for the east boundary, to a more central position, as shown on the current application. Following that meeting, the local residents, our chairman, Mr. Stuart Mason Elliott, wrote to everyone that attended, and he attached a copy of his presentation and confirmed that we had revised the location of the new warehouse well away from the residential boundaries. He went on to say that while this seemed to be well received, we would be pleased to hear any comments on the new warehouse before the planning application was submitted. I have a copy of the letter and the notes that went out to the residents. In consulting with the residents at that meeting, we changed the colour of our existing building on the north and east elevations from silver to brown, and the proposed new warehouse is also brown on the elevations facing the residents. We note from the concerns, from the officer's report, the concerns about additional flood lighting, but I would like to confirm that the lighting was part of the previous planning application for the site, and there is no additional flood lighting specified or required for the site on this application. There were also concerns about the drainage being overloaded, but the yard is completely concreted and the same amount of water will fall and disperse on the yard whether there is a building there or not. With regards to the increased noise and activity on the site, we can confirm that the previous tenants, WT Burdens, operated 9 lorries and 4 forklift trucks on the site, and we currently have 2 lorries and only 3 forklift trucks. Finally, the new building has allowed us to design a traffic flow, including the loading and unloading of lorries, in the yard well away from the residence boundaries.
Your time is up. If you can just finish off in one
Okay.
quick sentence, please.
And as such, we greatly reduce any noise and disturbance that may have been experienced when Burdens occupied the site. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Leeks.
Sorry.
Hi, and good evening to you. So why is it then that some of the neighbours are complaining about the additional storage racking against that fencing?
If I remember rightly, I was at the meeting with the residents, and we had proposed originally to the residents that we would put racking all along the east boundary and move put a shed on the northern boundary. Our thoughts were that that would reduce noise completely, or certainly significantly. The residents were very keen that that didn't happen. And because of that, we recited the application, the building, and what we have done is put 2 racks of racking. Those of you that came to the meeting can see those. They run parallel with the northern boundary, some way away from the eastern boundary and towards the main entrance. There are 2 there, and I would say that those of you who did come would see that Arctic lorries certainly could not go down there. The turning circle that we propose is quite clear on there, and the shed will not impose on that either, because if you remember rightly, we actually store our timber on the floor in the position of that store as it is at the moment. So I'm at a loss to understand how that isn't being operated at the moment. I've been up there a lot the last week. That is exactly how it's turned. The lorries turn. In fact, just after you gentlemen came up, a lorry came in and did exactly that. I spent 15 minutes watching him being unloaded and literally turning as it's shown on there. They can't go further on that picture. They can't go further to the right because we put the 2 racks up there to literally store product and stop that turning. I'm a bit confused, to be honest.
Thank you. Councillor Bound.
Yeah, did I understand you correctly to say that you'll be using the new racking to soften the outline of the new building? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the idea, if you can see the cladding around that building there, shown there, that is actually the racking to put packs of timber on. So when you look at it, it will be packs of timber with a brown background, I must say, but rather than a flat wall of brown steel, we're actually putting and moving our timber racking there.
So soften it from the point of view of whom?
Rather than a solid state of steel, we've put timber onto that racking.
So you're talking about people from outside the site. They're going to be satisfied with this racking around the outside of the building to soften the outline of the building.
Yeah, the proposal was that rather than put that racking against the fence or away on the boundaries, that we would move it into there, and our view is that it will actually soften it. Whether you can actually see that building from any of the boundaries, I would question, to be honest.
I think it was just the fact that you said that it was there to soften the outline of the building that struck me. How many Arctics would be parked up on the site of an evening?
We have 2 lorries on site. Yeah, we do. I believe we have the ability to store 3. We don't foresee that coming for some time yet.
Councillor Bierman?
Thank you. The movement plan seems to be something of an issue, and as to whether you've adhered to it. I mean, it's important to my mind in respect of, obviously, if you put the building there, that's going to potentially affect where vehicles can move to. I have just had sight of, I mean, when we were on site, I have to agree from what I saw, it's difficult to envisage our ticks going up to the boundary of 16. But I do also see a picture that's been circulated to some members that clearly shows Arctics right up to that fence. How could that be?
I don't know how old those pictures are, but initially when we took over the site, we had to move product into place, racking, etc., and we were having the main building clad as well at the same time. I know there was a question about scaffolding, which we don't stock. We understand that that was by the people that were cladding the building. So I don't know how old those are. Also, I would say that we laid the timber on the floor where we stood when people came to see the site, so that turning circle that's been there since we've moved in. So that turning circle was there. So they can't drive any further than that timber. Sorry, there isn't any racking shown on there, but it is. I have got a plan with the exact position of the racking.
Sorry, we can't accept that.
Okay.
Should have been submitted before.
Sorry, I just saw some photos going around, which I didn't think we could show either. Sorry, I didn't know. Sorry.
The plan with that submitted to can you pop that on? No, I just am looking at the moment for reassurances that what is shown in these plans, how it will remain, and that's what you intend. And therefore, if residents said this isn't being adhered to, you'd be able to say, mea culpa, we've been caught, we shouldn't be doing this. Is that right?
100%, yes. The plan to make that yard run efficiently is to work it that way. And if we weren't doing that, then the managers and the people involved need to be told. 100%. That's how we want it to run.
And if to maintain the goodwill of the residents that had been sought, you were asked to strengthen the vegetation on the boundary between yourselves and 16, which does seem a bit on the flimsy side at present, would you find that something you might be able to take on board?
I apologise. That we believe is the landlord's responsibility. It certainly was touched on at our meeting with the residents back in January, and I think there were some options discussed, but it is actually the landlord's responsibility. They're looking into it currently. Yeah, and we would have no problem with it at all.
And lastly, it's been suggested that your floodlighting, which the report seems to suggest isn't going to change, but presently is a nuisance. Can you not do something about the directionality of that floodlighting?
The floodlighting, as I understand it, is on a timer, and it goes and a sensor. The sensor means that when it becomes dark, the lights turn on up until 5 o'clock in the evening. And 5:30 in the evening, then it cuts off. I believe that some people came to inspect the lighting. We wanted to show them exactly how it flooded the yard, but we're told that we weren't allowed to turn it on because it was in the daylight, so we couldn't turn it on, and they had to take some guesstimates on that. I mean, we would be prepared to shy it away from, as long as health and safety would work that way, from our neighbours. Yes, 100%.
Just to clarify that point, I've understood you right, that any day of the week, unless there were a major emergency of some type, you're saying that floodlighting wouldn't be on after 17:30?
Sorry, that's correct. We did have one incident when it was first fitted where they didn't put the timing right, and we had a complaint, so we stopped that straight away.
Councillor Mrs Taylor.
Thank you. My questions have largely been asked by Councillor Bierman. But I'm still looking at these pictures of massive articulated lorries looming over the fence of number 16. So have I got your absolute assurance with the new racking in place, this large space on the eastern side of the plot will not be accessible to large lorries? Is that correct?
I'm sorry, no. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Just to confirm, yes, we've laid the racking out so that that movement is the most efficient way of us using the site, and because of that, they cannot go further than the 2 racks that aren't shown on there.
Councillor Mrs. Tucker.
Thank you. Back to racking. I too have got these photographs showing how a lorry has, and it might be, as you say, a previous one, but how a lorry has actually been backed up towards the fence of number 16, obviously to then offload onto something. Now, with this way that you're doing it at the moment, how do the lorries actually offload their charges, or whatever you want to call it, onto the racking?
The lorries are positioned in the centre of the yard as shown there, and forklift trucks take off the product. They shouldn't and won't reverse. I don't even think they can, because of the layout of the racking, reverse down or drive down to the east boundary. They are literally offloaded on forklift trucks, by forklift trucks, sorry, not on forklift trucks.
So what was visible previously, you say cannot happen in the future because it's impossible?
Sorry, I haven't seen the photos. I don't know when the photos were taken. All I can say is that as those of you that came to the site, you could quite clearly see where the racking is. That's been there for a couple of months now, and there is no way you can offload down beyond that racking.
Chairman, can I just make a point? It's relating to everything. I mean, with respect, some of us don't have the photographs that are being referred to, and to be frank, nor should we, by the way. And certainly the applicant doesn't have the photographs, so it must be difficult for them to comment on their contemporary nature and all the rest of it. Well, not to me, and well, I haven't, and in terms of our rules, in terms of what we have in front of us, I don't believe
I'll ask
evidence
the
that we should
officers
have in front
to
of us this
advise us
evening.
on that.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just to clarify, I mean, there's nothing to prevent anyone from circulating information to members before the committee. You're absolutely right. We have rules about what can be shown on committee. We've had this issue at previous committees. Effectively, the only documents we would show on screen would be photographs that the officers themselves have taken from their site visit, because obviously they can explain where they were. The plan that was shown there with some crosses on that was effectively the officer just trying to assist the committee in terms of what you saw on the site viewing in terms of approximate location of the racking, which is, I believe is shown on that photograph, and the application plans themselves. That was what we would actually show in terms of the visual information on the committee evening.
Thank you. Councillor Mr. Tucker, had you finished?
Not quite. Sorry, when we were on site, I asked whether it was possible to have acoustic fencing all the way up next door to 16, where the others have had it. And I was told by your colleague who's sitting behind you that they had been asked if they would like it, and they said they didn't want it. Is that correct?
Try again. As I say before, at the planning meeting, the fence was, all fences were related back to Stacey Estates, who actually own the premises and they are our landlords, and they went away with a number of things that they were offering to do, and I know they have done them. For instance, behind our main building there, they had to reinforce some of the fencing because I believe one of the neighbours has a dog that manages to sneak out from his fence and he didn't want it into our yard. So I know they've done those sort of things. As far as this planning application is concerned, I wasn't aware that we would be talking about the fences, etc. And that is our landlord's. We'd be happy to work with our landlord on those things, but it's not part of what I see as this planning application. And I'm just a little bit confused that we have taken a lot of time. We did change the original planning considerably. That shed in the middle is not where we would prefer it. It's where, with consulting with the neighbours, we felt that it would be the best place to put it. It is a long way from most of the boundaries. It does naturally form a good turning circle for the lorries, and therefore we thought we were doing all the right things to comply with our neighbours' concerns. And that's why we had the meeting back in January. That's why we've done what we've done.
Thank you. Councillor Potter. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible just to put the plan of the racking on with the crosses, please? Thank you. So thank you very much for coming on, Tack. Can you please just confirm that that's the correct placement for the racking, and you know that it's almost as per the photograph and as per those crosses up there?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it might be slightly to the right of that.
Sorry, it looks like it might be slightly to the right of that, more in line with the end of the building, but yeah, that's very close. Very close.
Sorry, Chair, just one supplementary. So I'm assuming that each one of those crosses represents a set of racking, and if so, would that mean that and would that mean that the placement of the racking should all be moved slightly to the right, or should it just be the first couple of crosses?
Sorry, I was going to say, can I? Sorry, but I'm sorry, Angus. Sorry.
I'm sorry, you're not down to speak. It's just the one representative who's down to speak. So can I ask you to sit down, please?
Yeah, that I think has just been drawn very, very quickly by the young lady up there. Thank you for doing that. If you like, I have the one that was sent in, which is correct, which shows everything on there. I know not supposed to put anything, but I believe that was sent prior to this meeting and is part of our planning application.
Chair, if I can just try and draw this particular point to a close, please, in terms of the plans. The plan, as I understand it, that Mr. Cleary has before him, was submitted to the application. It wasn't submitted and accepted as part of the planning application, so we wouldn't normally display it on the plan, so I think it wouldn't be correct to circulate it now. Effectively, the crosses drawn there are approximate locations only. It's just simply to try and, if you like, record what members saw on site in terms of the approximate location of the racking, and sort of supplemented by the photographs that have been shown as well.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Sorry, Chair, I'd just like to say thank you very much. I was just trying to understand, you know, the approximate position of the racking. Thank you.
Any other questions? No, thank you very much. Right, normally at this part of the proceedings we'd ask the local ward member to come forward and speak. Unfortunately, he's unable to be with us this evening, so I'll ask the committee. He has circulated his comments. Have everybody read those comments, or would you like somebody to read them out? Yeah.
Some of this may be my own response. I've been away and therefore I haven't seen what has been circulated, so I haven't heard those. I haven't read those comments, and it would be appropriate, I think, if they could. I don't know how extensive they are. Sorry, but if they're readable, I would welcome that personally.
Right, well, Councillor Mrs Tucker did agree to read them out on behalf of Councillor Musson. So what I will ask you is that, just imagine Councillor Mrs Tucker is now Councillor Musson. They are not her words, they are his words, and she will read them out.
and one or two other things. Chair, I would also say I haven't got it. It might be because I'm a substitute, but I was not aware of this. So.
You're going to hear them now. Just have a good imagination. Councillor Musson.
Right, now, be serious. Firstly, I would like to apologise for not being present and to thank my colleague, that's me, for presenting these points on my behalf. This site is owned by Stacey's, who have some responsibility for the maintenance of the boundary, I understand. It has a long history of development going back many years, when it was first operated by Stacey's as a lorry park, then a Bilger's Merchants operated by Hendricks, then Burden's, followed by Wolsey, who subsequently closed their Tadley operation. It was empty for a period of months before Elliott's took a lease, for a period, I believe, of 10 years. There has been a long history of complaints from the residents on Silchester Road to the north and east, as well as residents on Blake's Lane to the south and southeast. I understand that Burden's business was concentrated mainly on heavy materials for groundworks, and that their open storage was to the southeast, closer to Blake's Lane. Their business was very different to Elliott's, and as such received less vehicle movements. Nevertheless, the residents of Blake's Lane had cause to complain on many occasions, and as a result, Burden submitted and were granted permission to erect a 3-metre acoustic fence to, quote, reduce the noise and disturbance created through the operation of the site, BDB 20434, dated October 2011. Elliott's is, by their own admission, a very different business model to Burden's. As such, it has a larger number of vehicle movements and is of a higher intensity operation, which has the potential to cause more nuisance than the previous occupants. I believe the concerns raised by the residents and the pictures presented show that the residents' concerns are justified. When he refers to pictures, the pictures were appended to this report. Furthermore, we have seen enforcement action regarding the floodlighting, investigations by the enforcement team in relation to the racking and storage of materials along the eastern boundary, which also, in my view, create concerns as to health and safety with such high storage next to a garden fence. It's also a concern that heavy goods vehicles are being operated so close to the fence, presumably for loading and unloading as well as turning. As a ward member, I was concerned that our approach to the developments on this site was fragmented and that we needed to look at the site in its entirety as well as its long history in order to view it as the residents see it and not as a series of routine planning matters undertaken by a series of different officers. Indeed, I was at that time picking up some comments from residents that the borough officers were not attending to their concerns with the diligence they would have expected, given, in their opinion, the gravity of their concern. I wrote to Karen Brimacombe on the 10th of April 2014 requesting that we escalate the issues raised by the residents and asked for a senior officer to take an overall view. I also mentioned that concerns were being raised by residents about the approach taken by our planning office, and I wanted to avoid the need for residents to submit formal complaints regarding our officers. Karen passed my comments to Mike Townsend, I understand, and she asked him to assist officers. In my view, I don't think we as a local authority have done a good job on behalf of our residents on this site, not only with the many issues surrounding the Elliott's business, but in the past as well as that this has caused considerable inconvenience and nuisance for the residents. I believe this is because we have had many different case officers involved, each trying to play their part, but no one taking an overall view of the site and issues. In essence, we have seen a great deal of what the Army would call...
Under normal circumstances, I would say time's up if this is Councillor Musson. So can you sum up in one quick sentence?
And I'll finish the sentence. I'm sorry, I don't speak as quickly as he does. And it's gone... sorry, let me go back to where I was. In essence, we have seen a great deal of what the Army would call mission creep, and it's gone unnoticed or by our planning office but obviously not by the residents, hence my request to Karen Brim to come back in April. And there is just a list of things that he wanted actioned.
Thank you. Unfortunately, they won't be able to allow you to question Councillor Musson.
Oh, good.
What, another ward member, Councillor Leeks, did you wish? Questions to officers? Yes, sir. Right, any questions? Anybody got any questions? Want to move, Councillor Potter?
I mean, obviously, I'm not of Councillor Musson, but in terms of, can I invite a comment from the officers? 'Cause it does seem to me, I mean, I didn't know much about the history that we've just had detailed, but it seems to me most of those matters relate to potential non-compliance with certain planning approvals, perhaps enforcement areas, whether they've been taken or not. Now, historically, that may or may not be the case. I genuinely don't know. But in regard to where we are this evening, am I right in saying that notwithstanding that catalogue as described by Councillor Musson, read out by Councillor Tucker, we still must consider this application in its own right on the basis of what we have in front of us? Any of those other matters about non-compliance with A, B, C and D, you know, some of the things that have been listed tonight, are matters that would have to be taken forward in a separate and different way. Am I right in that presumption, Chairman?
I'll ask officers to respond.
In short, yes, you are correct. I think also what needs to be borne in mind is that you can have somebody operating from a site and they may, just like maybe a restaurant, you might have a restaurant use, but it can operate different under different owners or different occupiers, same with a residential property. And I think there probably is that's partly to explain some of the concerns, and that has to be borne in mind as well. Thanks.
All right, Councillor Band.
Sorry, I didn't manage to go on the site viewing. I mean, these photographs that are flashing up here, I don't understand them because I don't know where they're taken from. Is it possible that somebody could explain that?
I ask the officers to do that.
This photo is taken from if you were driving into the site from the access, and you can see a lorry, and behind it are the two racking areas that have been mentioned. So that photo is taken from coming into the site in the direction that the pen's pointing towards. That is taken, that's looking up to the northern boundary, and again you can see a side of the racking and part of an existing building. Yeah, basically if you were stood at the front of the new building, that's what you'd be looking out at, yeah. Yes, it'd be behind you, yeah.
Right, and no further questions. We move into debate. Councillor Leeks.
Chairman, I would like to say this brings me very much to the fact of the forge in Tudley, which is down Bamber Heath Road, where we had a little forge. Well, everybody knows what a little forge is, blacksmiths, etc., etc. And those of us who have been on planning or been on the council for a long time will remember what happened there. Forge was knocked down and an almighty huge great big building was built there to repair motorcycles, and it had housing around it, and of course it upset some of the neighbours, and it really went on for years actually. But we have the same problem here. We have the builder's merchant covered on virtually 3 sides out of 4 sides by housing, and this sort of thing doesn't work in a housing, when you've got three out of 4 sides covered by it. It does not work. I wish I could say I would give my full support to this, because it has brought in a bit of employment to Tadley. Everybody likes employment, but I can't, because the neighbours, it's caused all sorts of problems with the neighbours around there, and I have to say I cannot support this as I see it at the moment. I'd love to have said yes, but I'm afraid at the moment I cannot say I'm going to support it. I'm sorry.
Councillor Bierman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm ever so pleased that I was there on the viewing, because that does help to visualise what's going on and understand the situation. The point is really that this site is in an unfriendly location. It's not, if you were starting from scratch, there's no way you'd put that there. The trouble is, as a DC committee, we have to live with the facts as they are at present, and they may have evolved, and there might have been mission creep and all the other things, which I'm sure there has, because I've seen other situations, but we are where we are. And if we look at the site that's there and say, will the introduction of this building, A, be an eyesore to the residents around, or B, have consequences that are unfortunate, then in terms of the first question, i.e. will it be an eyesore, have a visual impact of any significance, my personal view is none at all. It's so far away from the houses that nearby residents will see the racking and other things before they see the building, which is, as I say, sort of, you have to sort of stretch over the fence to see it, in my view. So if you can see it, it is so distant and remote that it won't do any harm. However, there is the question of the consequence of the building being there and whether it has an impact on the lorry movements. There's a suggestion that the movements have been different. I have to say, I would agree with the applicant that the racking was more to the right than is shown on our with our crisscrosses on that other plan. From what I recall, it went quite over, and I don't believe it would have been easy without a very skilled driver and a lot of manoeuvring to get a lorry over to the fencing there. So I suspect that the pictures that have been put around are a bit historical. But if the lorries are going over there, it's clearly outside the movement plan. And it seems to me there are potentially, like the lighting, like the lorry movements, like anything else, nearly anything else that's been mentioned tonight, it's a question of enforcement of what is already there and whether the enforcement is strong enough. Now, I do know, well, I would submit humbly, with all respect to officers, our enforcement isn't sometimes as strong as it should be. But then again, there are times when officers can't do enforcement if they're not advised of problems that are perceived by neighbours. So perhaps neighbours should, unfortunately, be encouraged to be a little more proactive in saying this isn't as we perceived it. I think the applicant might be persuaded. I think we all know it doesn't matter who owns the site or who runs the site. You can put in the application and make conditions that are irrespective of what or whose responsibilities. So I think we could quite reasonably ask that there be some strengthening of the boundaries. And I have to say, speaking personally, I'd sooner see growth rather than a hefty fencing along the eastern boundary, and that might ameliorate some of the pain suffered by the resident of number 16. But beyond asking for that additional provision, if we could ask it, if officers believe that's a reasonable requirement, in itself, as long as the conditions are complied with, or those already are existing are also complied with, I can't personally see a difficulty with the new building. I can't see a serious negative impact on the surrounding properties.
Councillor Potter?
When I was, talking to the objector about this originally, I mean, I used to live next to an industrial estate myself, and I made the mistake of choosing a house when I lived there. That was my mistake, and I know the sort of problems that go with that, and residential and industrial areas together don't mix, but that's sometimes the case, and it clearly is here. I think what I need to remind myself and everybody else is that obviously the use of the site isn't under consideration. I mean, all we're looking at is the application relating to this erection of an additional storage building. And as Councillor Byrne has just said, if there are residual matters that relate to non-compliance with reasonable conditions that apply to the use of the site, they should be dealt with under an enforcement basis. If they haven't, then I'm sure people will look into this and that can be dealt with. But in regard to this specific application, whether this is a reasonable proposition for dry storage, whether this warehouse, in planning terms, would it be acceptable on that basis? I say it is, and I support the application on that basis, Chairman. And I'd move that.
Anybody wish to second that? Any more comments? Councillor Mrs. Tucker?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm sure that the applicants would like to be good neighbours to all the residents around. I know that this application only deals at the present time with that one particular building that's been put before us. But what has happened, whether you call it mission creep or whatever you call it, things are now in a situation that are not really acceptable by the people who live around it. It really is not very kind to their way of life. I wonder if there's any way that they can hear me, or we can put a note on whatever permission is granted or otherwise, that perhaps they could be encouraged to get together with the landlords. As I understand, the boundary treatment is the key thing where this is concerned. If they could get together with it and come up with a plan that would make the lives of the people, particularly on the east and the north, live a much nicer life, and they can continue to expand their exceedingly busy, and I hope for their sake, a successful business. I don't know whether this is possible.
Just a response to Councillor Tucker's comments, certainly it has been done before. If there's a particular comment, if you like, which can't be formed into condition, I don't think it could be in this instance, that the committee would wish, if you like, to bring to the applicant's attention, that could certainly be brought forward by way of an informative.
Anybody else wish to speak? It's been moved and seconded for approval. Can we add that informative on? With the informative, if the proposer and seconder are happy with the informative? Yep. Moved and seconded for approval. All those in favour of approval, please show. Those against? Ask the officer to confirm that decision, please.
The application is approved subject to the conditions on the officer's report and, in addition, the informative as requested by members.
Thank you. We now move on to item number 4, land at Hillacre, Reading Road, Sherfield-on-Loddon. We have public participation. May I ask David Thornton from Chinham Parish Council come forward, please? Ask the officer to introduce the application.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the erection of 9 dwellings, 3 2-bed dwellings, 5 3-bed and 1 4-bed, and retaining Hillacre as well, which forms part of the application. Just to bring to your councillor's attention, Hilltop falls outside of the application, as is shown on the red line before you. If I can bring to your attention the update paper and the comments that were recorded after the viewing panel. There's also officers' comments with regards to possible alternative, the alternative access route, and also some comments on open space which were raised at the viewing. Members should also note that the recommendation has now changed. On the agenda papers, it says it's subject to the completion of the legal agreement. The legal agreement has actually now been completed, so the recommendation would be for approval subject to the completed legal agreement. And if I can also bring to your attention that there's been some minor changes to conditions 1, 3, 18 and 19, which are on the update paper. So in accordance with those new conditions, the officer's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you. Mr. Thornton, you have up to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. My name's David Thornton. I'm Chair of Planning for Chinham Parish Council. Chinham Parish Council objects to this proposal, but not the principle of developing the Hillacre site. That was decided years ago, and we aren't objecting to that. What we are objecting to is the access into Fox's Furlong. You'll note that that goes across an area of open space, which is what we consider particularly valuable, that it's unsupervised open space, the sort of place where youngsters can play unsupervised games without adults breathing down their necks, and these sorts of places are, we suggest, rather precious. If the road is put across it, it will alter the character of that pit of green entirely. Now, previously, we have always taken the view that the site should be accessed from the north, but in several previous applications for this site, because I think it goes back to about 2008, as I recall, it was always pointed out that as the layout of the Taylor's Farm development to the north had not been decided, it could not be planned to have access to the north. Well, now the Taylor's Farm development is there, and there is an area of green open space which could provide the access. Now, this is a problem because, as I've said, that it is, if you like, a battle between two areas of open space. But we would say that one of those is in use by the families. It's been used by the residents of Fox's Furlong for some 20 years. It's there, and it's much loved by the local residents. The open space to the north, which unfortunately the location plan doesn't really show what's happening very well in Taylor's Farm, because they've built some houses since that was done. But the site could be accessed by crossing the open space to the north. Now, obviously, one could argue that would diminish things for the residents of Taylor's Farm, but that, I would submit, is the future residents of Taylor's Farm. That open space is not yet in use. It's future open space. So, although it's unfortunate that access to the site must be across public open space, surely it makes more sense to use the space not yet in use by residents, rather than that used for recreation and play by the people of Fox's Furlong. Now, we note that in the papers with this, there are proposals for money to be set aside for the enhancement of the Fox's Furlong play area, and we certainly don't oppose that, except that it's the unofficial, it's the freedom that people have on that sort of thing, on that sort of play space, which if you put a road across it, I think parents will be much less likely to want their children to go across there. And so we think that the access should go to the north and leave Fox's Furlong with their play space. And I think the other thing I would like to point out, that neither Fox's Furlong nor Stockbridge Close, into which it leads, are suitable for the increase in traffic that will come from another development. It's very narrow, very constricted, and it's a very bendy road, if I can put it that way, into the site, and we don't think that to add any more traffic to it would be unfortunate, to say the least. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? No, thank you. Oh, Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm just a little confused. You said land to the north. Can you be a little bit more specific and try to describe on the map that it is put up exactly where you're suggesting this access should be?
Your light on, please.
The blank space to the north, which at present is shown as blank, there where the pen is now, is going to be an open area. It has, in fact, now, I think it has now been recently sort of raked and seeded by the developers. But what the plan doesn't show is the completed houses. Oh, there we are. We have got the completed houses here. Because there is a road on the east side.
The officers are offering to point things out and describe the site. Just
Right.
Turn your light off, please.
Oops. Okay, the site, the plan, sorry, that's in front of you, that's the area that was known as the Klinger land. That's being developed by Crowdace. That has consent. The area to the right of that, where the pen's going now, that's the open space area. There's a footpath link that I think you went through on the site viewing that now links through. To the right of that footpath, as you come through into that area, that's where there's going to be an equipped play area. That open space, there were two reasons for it. The settlement policy boundary, all of that area is excluded from the settlement policy boundary. It was also kept as open space for the setting of Sherfield Hall, which is a listed building. The open space there that's been approved and is being constructed is basically to serve the new residents of Taylor's Farm. Without that, they would then have a deficiency in open space and play area. That scheme has already been approved. In between, if we go back to the red line there, there's an area where I've just shown with my pen where you can see that's an area of land that isn't owned by, we don't know who owns it. So effectively, which is not for consideration now, but for an access road to go through, it would have to be going over land that we have no control over. The developers for this current site have no control over. We don't know who the landowner is. At the end of the day, the access that's for consideration for this application is off Fox's Furlong.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No further questions of the parish? Councillor Potter?
Hello, Mr. Thornton. I just wanted, you'll understand only too well, obviously, with your role in the parish council. I've said this before this evening, we've only got what we've got in front of us tonight. My understanding is it's not for us to try and design a scheme that the developers might be interested in or not. We look at what we've got. And as I understand it, where the road is now proposed in terms of the Fox's Furlong cul-de-sac, it is fairly immediately on the left as you turn into Fox's Furlong, which I think is a move from what had been approved previously under a different planning approval. As I understood it, that wouldn't interfere with the public open space that you're saying the residents of Fox's Furlong hold so dear. It would have a much more marginal effect on that. It would be to the left of that as you look out from the houses from Fox's Furlong opposite, and therefore the majority of that area would still remain. Am I right in that?
I think you are right in the majority of the land would still be there, but available. But I think it's, shall I say, a matter of opinion as to whether the bit that they are going to slice off would have a detrimental effect or not. We certainly the residents are, and the parish council think that it does have a detrimental effect, even though it has been moved. And I accept that it has been moved, but we still think it's detrimental.
Just to confirm the dimensions as I think I understand them, and I think we've demonstrated, it's about 10 metres, I think, isn't it, that we're talking about?
Probably, yes.
Right, no further questions. Thank you. Ask the objector, Mr. Randall, to come forward, please. No Mr. Randall here this evening. I will then ask Mr. Utting to come forward. Mr. Utting, you also have up to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and members. Your officer's report deals with this application very thoroughly, so I only wish to emphasise a few points for you to consider this evening. This application has stemmed from lengthy and detailed discussions with your officers, with ward members, and your authority's portfolio holder for property in respect of the open space which your authority owns at the moment. In consultation with your officers and in light of residents' comments, initial proposals to develop the site with 12 dwellings have been scaled down to 9 dwellings, such that your officers are now consent with the form, layout and design of the proposal now before you. In consultation with your officers, ward members and your authority's portfolio holder for property, we've also carried out an exhaustive assessment of the options for an access to the site. We've heard an access from the A33 has been discounted on highway safety grounds, and an access from the Sherfield Park, Klingerland, I think it's known as, from the north, would be tortuous, pass through the middle of a large area of public open space, and would in fact not connect with my client's site, with the application site. Your officers consider that an access to the site from Fox's Furlong across the northern tip of an existing area of open space would be safe and satisfactory in highway terms, would not have a significant impact on the functioning and integrity of the remaining open space to the south, and would in fact improve upon the arrangement for the site's development with 14 dwellings, which was consented by your authority in 2008, and which involved an access to the site from Fox's Furlong, but across the middle of the open space in question. Your officers, and I include your open space officer in this, consider that the small area of open space lost to the site's access, it's a 6-metre wide access, that's all we're talking about, it can be mitigated for by a one-off top-up to the open space contribution that would normally be sought from the site's development with 9 dwellings, and that's detailed in your update sheets. As such, the purchase of the land required for the site's access has been facilitated by an option agreement between my client, the applicant, and your authority as landowner. This arrangement can be best summed up by your authority as portfolio holder for property, and I quote from his report, which granted an option for the access to my client. And he says, open space for our residents is an important amenity. In this instance, and after considerable investigation of alternatives and consultation with local representatives, I consider that the access will result in a loss of open space that will not be material and will enable the provision of 9 new homes to meet the needs of our growing population. I therefore respectfully request that you grant this application as recommended, and in doing so facilitate the development of a suitable and sustainable site with housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, members? Councillor Potter?
Sorry, hello. I just wanted to confirm, I mean, looking at the site layout, which we have, obviously, in terms of where the access is proposed, it's adjacent, I think it's number 10, isn't it? Fox's Furlong. It would seem to me if any property is going to be directly affected by that vehicular access, it would be that one. But there is an area of landscaping open space shown adjacent to, I think, where the garage drive is shown. Can you help me in terms of what's proposed there, in terms of tree planting, hedging, etc.? Because I think that could be fairly important, I would have thought, to that resident, really.
Yeah, I'll do my best. The access lies adjacent to number 90 Fox's Furlong, which is the property of the garage that you just referred to. I think it's number 90. So it has its drive and the garage, and then the open space starts, in essence. In negotiations with your authority as landowner, the areas of land which my client will purchase under the terms of the option was increased to allow for that landscaping that you've pointed out. That will be covered by a landscaping condition, but you can see there's a note on the revision G plan. I'm not sure whether it reproduces on your sheets, but there's a note on my plan that says new tree planting. So there'll be a combination of new trees, hedging, a good quality brick boundary wall to Unit 1, and that area of landscaping would be taken over by my client and would be managed as such. So it would form part of the land transaction, if you like, for the access. To the other side of the access, there would be a new post and rail fence which would separate the access from the remaining open space, and again that would be covered by condition. And for all I know, be covered by the terms of the land transaction. I know we're not talking about planning here, but there are certain requirements placed on my client to, in effect, make good the access and to integrate the access properly with its surroundings by way of landscaping, fencing, from both a visual and a safety perspective as well. The aim is for the access to look as if it's always been there, rather than have it imposed. So the landscaping and fencing will help that process.
Thank you, Councillor Mr Tucker.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm sorry I may have missed it, but can you remind me about the construction traffic? Is that going to come off the A33 and then go through, or how is it going to work?
That's something that we've discussed with your officers. I think lorry routing and construction vehicle routing is going to be covered by a condition. As part of discharging that condition, we have undertaken to explore with the County Highways Authority whether a temporary access can be introduced to the site from the A33. Simply just for these sort of the heavy groundwork phase of the site's development. That there, as you'll see from from the conditions recommended by officers, there's a certain structure and timing to certain elements of the site's development. Clearly, the new access, your officers would like the new access to be constructed sooner rather than later, and we support that clearly, because the A33 isn't particularly ideal for any form of traffic. But I think as part of discharging a vehicle routing condition for the site's construction phase, we would look into the A33 and consult with the county and with your highways officers to see whether or not some temporary arrangement could be designed for a certain time whilst the site is being developed. So we're not rejecting that. I think it could be covered by a condition, and we could sit down and design something that's acceptable to mitigate the impact of construction traffic on residents, certainly.
I've got no further
questions. Can I just say thank you? It just had made me wonder whether the heavy stuff, as it comes in loaded, could come off the main road and then go through out the other way. Because you can't possibly come out onto the A33 because it's so dangerous, but coming in might not be quite so dangerous. That's what had gone through my mind.
Yes, certainly, like a sort of left-in, left-out arrangement. I mean, there's a roundabout further to the north on the A33, which will allow vehicles to travel north and then come south again without turning across traffic. Temporary traffic lights, for example. I think that could be dealt with by way of discharging a lorry routing condition, which has been recommended by your officers. So yeah, that's certainly very possible.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you. Next speaker, Ward Councillor, Councillor Miller. You also have up to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the committee members will have a sense of deja vu, because I've sat here before on the same application before I became a borough councillor some 6 years ago. I just heard a horror story, and in any contemplation of putting construction traffic through Fox's Furlong and Stockbridge Road is something that I would abhor, and I don't mind using that word. I just cannot visualize it, to take heavy construction traffic through that very narrow residential road area. Anyway, this application has reappeared before the DC committee for the 3rd time. The principle of the residential developments on Hillacre is not in question, however the access to it most certainly is. The first application generated the same local opposition as is presented this evening. That is the proposed access across the open space at the northern aspect of Fox's Furlong. This was created to provide the open space was created to provide a safe location for the local community together with a children's play area at the eastern end. A screen of cypress trees continues to provide a division between the residents of Fox's Furlong and the existing houses in Headacre. And some of these citrus trees are proposed to be removed without replacement, as far as I can tell from the plans that have been submitted. This is the removal of a residential amenity. This application seeks to cross the open space at the western end as an alternative to the original proposal to cross almost in the middle of the area. You've heard mention of that this evening. The original objections to the infringement and subsequent loss of open space also suggested two possible alternatives. This is historic, an access to the development via the A33 or an access through the evolving development of Taylor's Farm. Hampshire County Council has objected to an access via the A33 due to congestion and safety concerns. In spite of their intention, I refer back to the statement of the applicant, to allow the construction traffic for the Hillacre development, if approved, to have access from A33 on a temporary basis. The reason for not pursuing the alternative route to the north was given by officers at the time as an issue with land ownership. The situation for this application is similar, except in the intervening years, the ownership of the land to the north appears to have been resolved, as was the ownership of this open green space in the original application, which is why it failed. And a large area of open space has been created for Taylor's Farm. The land, I understand, will be transferred to BWC in due course. It is obvious now that the alternative route through Taylor's Farm was disregarded at the outset, and the impact for any loss of the open space will be borne by the long-term residents of Fox's Furlong. An integrated, properly designed route through Taylor's Farm would have provided minimal loss of the large open space to the north of Fox's Furlong. There will be an increased traffic flow through what is currently a cul-de-sac, increasing danger to children who currently play in this open space from through traffic, picket fence or not. That's not going to stop children getting interfered with the road. Loss of the land will mean children will wander off to other areas for play and incidentally present potential problems. This is an aside for the access of emergency vehicles. The report mentions there will be a contribution to offset the loss of open space. Money does not create open space. We're having an issue with that all over the borough. Or improved amenity that is lost, especially as it has provided a secure area for children for decades. This equivalent or better provision in terms of quality and quantity in a suitable location, i.e. for the community of Fox's Furlong, is against the MPPF, unless it is provided against MPPF Para 74, which calls for that replacement provision. The MPPF has appeared since the last expired approval for this site. If the application is unfortunately approved, one more sentence please, Chair, is serious consideration should be given to the imposition of a 10-mile-an-hour speed limit for the access road from Hillacre into Fox's Furlong. I ask the committee to evaluate the comments and refuse this application on the grounds of inappropriate access and adverse impact on the Chinham community. Thank you very much.
Any questions, members? Councillor Potter?
Hello, Councillor. I just want to be absolutely clear, I might need the advice of others, but in regard to the loss of the tree screening, you know, where the trees exist, fairly substantial trees at the moment. I mean, I don't know how objectionable these dwellings are going to be that are proposed in terms of the visual aspect, but my understanding is that it's only the trees that are needed for the vehicle access that will be removed and everything else will remain. I mean, is that your understanding as well?
Thank you, Councillor Potter. My understanding can only go on the plans that I've had a look at, like we've all had a look at on the application. It's not particularly clear which ones are going to go. It is my understanding that a substantial portion of those will go, because one of the suggestions by the applicant, I understand, there's a bund. I don't know if you were shown the bund on the viewing panel, further along the back of the open space, that the space to the north of that into the Hillacre area was potentially going to be improved. Now that means all the trees coming down from the access all the way down to the bund will disappear. Now it must be 2/3 of them at least. Now unless it can be explained to me any other way, most of them are going to go. But that's the only thing we've got to refer to, and in any detail I have no idea.
Chairman, I mean, I don't know if it's a matter for later for questions of the officers or whether you want to deal with it now, but I mean, you know, clearly we have a difference of view, I think, perhaps even interpretation. My understanding was that the majority would remain. If that's wrong, can I be advised differently?
I'll ask the officer to explain.
Thank you. I mean, the plan before you shows the access road, and then you've got 4 circular trees. So those would be, as I understand it, new trees. That section there, that's would be where you would lose a proportion of trees, and then from there downwards to the southeast, all of the existing trees and bund area would all remain.
Does that help? Councillor Mrs Taylor?
Hello. I wasn't on, obviously the safety of children is of paramount importance in anything that we consider. I wasn't on the site viewing, so I'm just trying to get the lie of the land. Could you just explain to me, so I can understand, why the children are going to be so much less safe once this access road is here? I mean, as I look at this small development, the traffic that comes out of it surely is not likely to turn left. It's likely to turn right, so it's going to be turning away from the play area, not towards it, because there's a cul-de-sac at the bottom. So is it seriously going to compromise the safety of children having that access road just at the north of their site?
Chair, may I ask for the photograph to be put up again that you had earlier on of, I think it's the photograph from the western side looking east? Has the play area in the distance? Thank you. Just to the left of where this photograph's been taken from is where the access road will come in. At the moment, the trees you see on the left-hand side, there's a solid screen of trees that goes all the way down. There's nothing at the back there. Now, the children, when they play, and the bund area is part of their play area as well, they cover that whole area. It's a kickabout area. Yeah, we all know what they are in our own communities. And that, having talked to the residents, they use it as a safe haven for children. The children can go up there, not only from these houses on the right-hand side, but all over the northern part of Fox's Furlong. Fox's Furlong's got something like 350 houses. It's not just this one road. It's a very complex area of development. And the residents consider this a safe haven. If you have car movements coming from the left here, picket fence or not, as I mentioned earlier, you can't let your children just go out and play. I'm sorry, but no parent that I know, knowing that there's going to be random movements of traffic crossing their area, that's why the safety of children is of concern to the residents. I'm a grandfather, but these people are raising young children on these particular developments, and they are the ones expressing the concern. I'm here to deliver that concern.
I entirely agree with you about safety. I'm just not quite understanding why many cars of the 9 houses would turn left down there anyway, because it doesn't lead anywhere. And presumably there are cars going down that road because there's houses on that as well.
Nothing leads anywhere in Fox's Furlong stop grids. They're all cul-de-sacs in Shinham. What this does is, if you go down that road, it's like the houses on the right are part of the northern part of an island of a development. They go all the way around. There's some affordable housing. If you turn right at the end of that view, there's affordable housing on the left and another turn right, and that's the only way you can get out of. There's one way in and one way out. And the cars take the line of least resistance. If somebody came around and found that the road was blocked one way, they'll turn around and they'll come back in the other way. It's a random choice of where cars go.
Right, no other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions of officers? Move into questions of officers or debate? Question, right?
Slightly different from what's been discussed so far, and I just want to make a comment apart from anything else. I really am wrong-footed by having such an extensive update, which arrived very late. I was here, before 6 o'clock. The update wasn't there to try and, well, I didn't have time to read it properly in advance, and there's a whole list of amended conditions, and there's no way that I can sit and read those amended conditions and understand the total significance of so many changes. And I do think that whatever my thoughts during the debate or after, I wouldn't be happy about voting for this application for approval, because I don't understand the final consequence of the application that's before us with this late information, with so much changes. I can't understand, Chair, how we after the number of years that this has been on the table, that we suddenly find that the plans are wrong. That's blooming amazing, isn't it? It's been hacked over by everybody and the plans aren't even right. So anyway, that was not a question I appreciate, but I felt that had to be said up front. I just want to clarify this thing about the status of the roads. You might say it's not a planning thing, but normally roads are prepared for adoption by the county council. We see here, it came up on the site viewing, and we see here now that the roads planned here are not up for adoption, though they will be built to adoptable standard. Now, this is a trend that seems to be emerging that I'm very unhappy about, and I'd like officer advice as to whether at this stage we can say that non-adoption by the county authority is not acceptable to us. Probably we'll be told we can't make them adopt them. But I think for this number of houses, not to be adopted by the county council is a retrograde step and presents problems for the future.
Firstly, can I just come back with regards to the conditions? They are very minor changes to the conditions. Condition 1, it just lists the approved plans. It was found that the red line was shown slightly differently from a location plan to a site plan. Very, very tiny. Also, with regards to condition 19, we had referred incorrectly to the fact that Hillacre and Hilltop were going to both lose their access points. Hilltop will actually retain its access point, albeit that it will have a new access through the proposed development. It's still going to retain its old access onto the A33. That's all that condition 19 is changed by. Condition 3 and 18, it was just typographical errors, and condition 20 was that had already been covered in the previous condition. So they're very, very minor changes to the conditions. It's not so substantial.
If I may say, Chair, just in response to that, with all respects to the officer, I would like to be able to judge these things for myself. And I can't judge them for myself if I'm not able to make a comparison and read them. Now, you know, from what the officer says, that sounds as though they're so diminutive they're of little relevance, although the access for Hillacre, for Hilltops, is more significant, although that was explained on the site visit, the situation with regard to that. But that could potentially be quite an important issue, and it's not something that's been considered by the public at large. So I maintain concern that such details and such quantity of detail is changing at this very late stage, particularly with the late sheet. Thank you.
Wait, can I just come back on the adoptable road? We can't make the developer offer the road up for adoption. It's a choice that they make. Sometimes it's more desirable to sell a site as an unadopted site, and that's what will help sell properties, but it's up to the developer to approach county.
Chair, can I make a request then that perhaps DC or another committee consider this trend, because one of the other things that was mentioned on the site viewing was that no street lighting was proposed. And we're not, Chinham isn't Old Basing, and I happen to believe that street lighting has a significant safety consideration about it, and it should be there. Sorry, Sven, I'm bits of Oakley and all the rest of it, but the normal world says that street lighting makes roads safer for children. We're talking about safety for children and other pedestrians and the like, and not to have street lighting in all that area is potty, in my view.
Well, we can write to the county, or we can raise it with another committee of this council. What would members like to do? Councillor Potter?
Well, I think it should be raised, obviously, in an appropriate policy committee of the council. I mean, it's going to be, as Councillor Bierman says, an increasing feature of residential applications as we go forward. There's going to be management companies involved in all of these agreements, some good, bad and indifferent, quite frankly, and the implications are going to be quite severe for some of those people who are buying these properties. Everybody would say, buyer beware, people will know of this when they purchase the property, but it is something that we could look at, and certainly the situation that we're going to face where people are going to be paying council tax but also paying these sorts of management charges is something that this council could look at in the best interest of its residents. What we can do about it, I have to say, is a very different thing. But, you know, there's lots of things we look at we don't do much about, so let's do it with this one as well.
Chair, as you put the question about where it should go, I do think it's, rather than just shooting off a letter to the county, a consideration by one of the overview committees would be appropriate, because we are talking anyway about surface water charges and all the rest of it. And as Councillor Potter has just reiterated, the issue is there's no real control over the escalation of these charges and how efficient the management is. And I think it's a stack of problems coming our way potentially.
I think we just said we are going to refer it to the relevant committee of this council. Right, no more questions, so we move in. Councillor Dunlop.
Thank you, Chair. I do have one question. I'm a little confused. Councillor Miller alluded to the fact that this piece of ground to the north of the site, which we were told was ownership unknown. Councillor Miller alluded to the fact it was about to be purchased by the council. Can the officer give me guidance on that, please?
And your light off, please.
Sorry.
So my understanding of what Councillor Miller said, unless I'm mistaken, is it's the open space that forms part of the Klinger land, which will be transferred to the council, as well as the equipped player that's going in. There's an area of land in between the two. So the site you're looking at and the Klinger land, that was the bit that I was saying we don't know who owns that land, and any access would have to go across that. So Councillor Miller was referring to the public open space, which is currently owned by Crowdace, which will then be transferred across to the council.
Thank you, Chair. That's fine.
Right, no more questions. We will move into debate, and I will go to Councillor Bierman as ward member.
Thank you, Chair. I think the history on this site will show that I'm very unhappy about not the building of the houses, have no problem with that, but the way we have arrived at where we are, because I firmly believe that a better answer could have been found with the commitment and the will, and that would have been through the top. But we are rightly reminded by officers that that's not what's in front of us, so we must consider what comes from the bottom. And I have to say again, I'm not so stupid that I can't recognise that having given permission for something even less desirable than this in the past, that the likelihood of us being able to defend refusal at this stage is very questionable. And so we are left with a situation where we might choose to refuse it. I would have thought it would have gone to appeal, and I can guess which way it would go. So my observations have to be that I obviously totally engage with the thoughts of both the parish council and my fellow ward members. This is not the right plan. This is the only plan we've got in front of us. And we can probably only seek to lessen the undesirable impact. I don't know that we can, well, as I say, I suspect we can't sustain resistance to it coming in from the bottom, because that's the only thing. So we've got to try and ameliorate it. The first thing is, I'm not at all happy about the looseness of the condition for the construction vehicles. It seems to me that the suggestion is, if the county feel like putting some traffic lights up on the A33 for a period of time, then that will be done, rather than, and I might have misread some more details in this update and so on, but at the end of the day, there's nothing firm giving a access and traffic plan during the process of the development, something that's been agreed prior to us getting there, and it finishes up with pressure from one side or another, but not getting the best result for the residents. It's a nonsense to have yet more traffic going through. Those that went on the viewing will know that it's uphill, apart from being narrow. When we went, it was during the day when there are very few parked cars. Just imagine that uphill route with the parked cars in it, and how difficult it would be to access the site. And if you're accessing the site with heavy vehicles up that hill, particularly in winter time, it will be chronic. So I think we need a firmer plan in terms of how the site is going to be constructed and how the construction traffic would come through, if permitted, from the A33 on a temporary basis. I totally 100% endorse the feeling that there shouldn't be permanent access from the A33, and I've said that in every forum that I have discussed this topic in. As regards the existing open space, if one looks at the trees that are going to be replanted, they seem to have migrated forward from the line of conifers that exist there at the moment. So, in so doing, they're reducing the open space that is being provided, in effect, the useful open space. I can't see why the trees that are proposed shouldn't be moved fairly far north so that they more or less come to the edge of the proposed new road, so that the available kickabout area is maximised there. I don't at all accept what is said in the update, and that bit I was able to quickly digest, which is that the, let's find it, that one can, so, oh yes, this bit about the enhancing the open space in Fox's Furlong in order to enhance its appearance and functional use of the compensate and offset the impact. It's perfectly in order as it is now. I don't know what one could do to enhance it. I don't think it would be enhanced by having yet more equipment on the play area, and the landscaping as it is at present is perfectly satisfactory. So I'd like somebody to explain, perhaps an officer can, how these thousands of pounds are going to seriously enhance what is there already, so that it is a real enhancement rather than tarting up what has been degraded in the process. Just coming to the benefits or otherwise of the lucky new residents, if the planning application were to be permitted, who would be up against the A33, I'm not at all comfortable that the noise amelioration is going to be satisfactory. We were told that the windows and the like would be a sound barrier. But if one wants to open one's window, that isn't a sound barrier to me, and people like to open windows in weather like we have at the moment. And I'd like to understand how residents of those new properties along the A33 will be able to cope with the noise from the A33 without having extra noise attenuation of some sort along there. Bear in mind the bund that's been referred to was put in to protect houses that are much further away from the A33, and it still remains something of a problem. With that, I will listen to what colleagues have to say about this, but at the moment there's certainly no way I can support the application, and it's just a question of whether I vote against it despite the undermining. I will say, sorry, there was one thing I did want to say. I think we have been let down, I'm sorry to say this, by our portfolio holder, because of course if the portfolio holder had not allowed the land to be transferred, i.e. that made provision for an agreement to sell off the land, it wouldn't have been possible to come through there. And all three ward members pleaded that the land should not be sold. And had the land not been sold, then the applicant would have had to find a different way of getting in or give up. And that different way of getting in did at one stage exist, even if its practicalities have been much diminished now.
Councillor Potter?
I make only one observation, I think, about the alternative access, and I'll leave it at that. I mean, the idea of an access through Taylor's Farm across the land currently owned by Crudas and splitting that open space in two ways, I mean, literally an access right across it, quite frankly, would seem bizarre to me, really, to get to this site. I would have thought that was much worse than is being proposed now, but obviously people will have their views about it. Anyway, that isn't under consideration, this is. And certainly, I mean, I don't want the officers to get carried away with this. I seem to be supporting every one of their recommendations tonight, really. I'm sure they'll not become complacent about this, but I support the officer's report on this. My major concern, like Councillor Bierman has said, really is around construction traffic. And we do have this problem whenever we go through existing residential areas to get to a site of this sort of description. It does seem to me, where we're talking about the stages of development, when we've got the groundworks and all the heavy machinery that's involved in digging out foundations and drainage and all the rest of it, the idea of some of that plant and machinery being brought through the residential area, I think, is appalling, really. And I think, really, people have got to work very hard at an alternative construction plan that allows for that to come from somewhere else. And to be honest, the only place it can come from is the A33, but that's pretty formidable as well, really, from our own experience of visiting the site. But I think that's going to be preferable. Once you get into the sort of second stages of development in terms of all the other material delivery and, you know, the bricks, the roof trusses, which can be done in relatively small quantities when it comes to just 9 houses, I don't think that is unmanageable through a residential area. So I'd like to think some wit and imagination could be put into this and we'd have a proper construction plan that allowed it to be split in that way. That apart, and it's subject only to that, I'd say that we should approve this application as we have it before us. And I think the access, which is to the extreme, obviously, of the open space, is in the right position. I think it will have much more of a minimal effect upon that open space area. There is existing traffic coming into the cul-de-sac in any case. This will marginally increase it, but I still think it will be a relatively safe area. And I think this application should be approved this evening, but with the caveat I've attached to work being done on a construction access plan for the delivery of materials, but also in the first place, those groundworks, which are going to be all important.
I take you moving the recommendation. Anybody prepared to second that? Yeah, seconded.
If I can just come back with regard to construction traffic, the condition 18 actually asks as part of that for the management and coordination of deliveries and plant materials. So at the moment, we'd be expecting information to come in from the developer on that. I can't categorically say that whilst we can ask the developer to look at the option of the first phase of the development with the construction traffic coming off the A33, I can't categorically say that Hampshire County Council will be happy with that from a highway safety point of view, with large vehicles stopping to have to turn and swing in to what is quite a narrow access at the moment to get down to Hilltop or Hillacre, whether they would actually be satisfied with that. So I can't, whilst we can ask them to look at that as an option, there's no guarantee that that would be available.
Councillor Frost?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just come back on that, because I've actually lived in the area a little further round in Longstock Close, and there is just no way on earth you're going to be able to get any sort of long articulated vehicle up round that sort of area. It's just a physical impossibility. I mean, I have to say that whilst I've seconded the motion, I do agree with Councillor Potter in the fact that we really need to have a well-managed access plan and for getting vehicles on and off. And I have to say, I personally think the only way it can be done, knowing the area, is to actually come off the A33. However that's done.
Thank you.
Chair, I mean, I entirely understand the point being raised, and I think I can see the benefits of certainly coming off the A33. I don't know whether I was also going to assist with this at all, but I think the point that Mr. Talbot is making is just simply that through the planning permission we can't guarantee that, because it effectively requires the Hampshire County Council as the highway authorities input, if you like, into the discharge of conditions. So certainly we can absolutely take the comments of the committee away and make that very clear to the county, and I think you've already had effectively an undertaking to develop that that's what they would explore first. But I think we just need to be absolutely clear that we can't say tonight that will definitely happen, and that's where we are. If there are alternatives in terms of then they can be explored, but I don't think we can give you that assurance as of this moment in time.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Councillor Bierman?
I did ask that the committee support the idea that the trees be moved back on the open space to make the space that's in front of it more viable.
I seem to recall from the site visit one of the applicants pointed out those trees are actually existing small trees, which will be exposed when these big ones come out.
The officer said there was some new planting there and pointed to those trees.
There is new planting, but these trees that are there, I was shown through the big hedge when we saw it from the other side, and it says on the plans, existing small trees. They are already there.
So what's the new planting to which the officer was referring?
Chair, I think when we were talking about the plan earlier, I think the plan probably hasn't replicated very well on the agenda plans, and those 4 round circles that were shown to the right of the access are effectively existing trees, as I understand it on the plans.
The problem I've got is I've got a survey plan here that doesn't match to the 4 circles there now, which potentially I thought were existing trees. They don't match the existing trees on site. The plan that's been submitted by the developer, whilst there's an arrow going to the lower of the 4 circles saying small existing trees, that's not in the position that's shown on their survey plan. So either they've got the arrow in the wrong place, because then you've got a collection, there's 2 trees with like some low-level planting between them. That's existing and that's definitely on here. So now whether they've annotated that incorrectly, I couldn't tell.
I mean, I wouldn't claim to know every tree in Chinham, but it's my recollection, for what it's worth, that those small trees that do exist that have been planted since the area was built up are certainly not very substantial, but they are further back anyway. Certainly, they're not in the position they're shown there that I recollect, but I might be mistaken. What makes it look different, of course, is the trees behind are no longer shown on that plan, so it spoils your perspective.
I say when we were viewing it from the other side, not the Fox's Furlong side, and I was shown, and you could see the trunks of the small trees through the big cypress trees. Anyway, it's been moved and seconded for a...
Oh, there was one other thing, which was the sound attenuation. Very sorry, I did say that I would ask whether there could not be improved methods of sound attenuation for the properties on the eastern flank abutting the A33.
There's acoustic fencing that's to go down behind the backs of plots 4, 5 and 6, which are to the north of Hilltop. So there's acoustic fencing and hedging that would go round the back of them.
Could you explain a bit more about the actual attenuation within the property?
Right. If I can just bring your attention to condition 23. It's basically saying a noise mitigation scheme shall include details of window glazing and room ventilation. So it's part of that condition they'd have to submit details of the actual mitigation scheme, and that could be in a variety of ways. It could be double glazing, triple glazing, different types of vents in the windows. And if I can just correct myself, the acoustic fencing runs the whole of the boundary down. It includes the 2 plots at the bottom as well.
So who will make the judgment? Because it's not part of the application. It's to be considered retrospectively by officers by negotiation, as I know some things are anyway. But who will make that final decision? Is that our environmental health team, or who makes the decision as to whether what is proposed eventually is satisfactory?
When information comes in, it goes to the environmental health team, and it's quite common. We don't have details on noise mitigation at the planning application stage, so all the details come in after the decision is issued. Environmental health are consulted. They will either be satisfied with it or they will want changes, and then they will say whether it's an acceptable scheme or not.
So lastly, if environmental health said we don't think what's proposed is satisfactory, the application or the building of those dwellings could not proceed.
But the condition that's been put there refers to different noise levels that they have to attain, and they know that will be attainable. They haven't put a condition on that they wouldn't ever be able to achieve.
Right, I'll try again. It's been moved and seconded for approval. All those in favour of approval, please show. Anyone against? I'll ask the officer to confirm that.
Thank you, Chair, that the application be approved subject to the completed legal agreement, the amended conditions on the order paper, and I have noted that in the officer's report it referred to a drainage condition. There was no drainage condition on the officer's report, so it's just prior to the commencement of development, a drainage scheme shall be submitted to and approved by the local planning authority. So subject to that additional condition, the application be approved.
Everybody happy with that?
Yep.
Right, we move on to item number 5, which is the telecommunications mast in Pelton Road. We have one speaker on this. Raminda Jatla. If you'd like to come forward, please, whilst the officer introduces the application.
This application is for the installation of a 17.5 metre monopole, including antennae set in a shroud, and the installation of 3 number equipment cabinets at ground level and ancillary works. The application is recommended for approval.
Thank you. You have up to 4 minutes.
Good evening. The proposed is to replace the current monopole that's placed further down along Pelton Road, which is currently operated only by O2. Development on the site is to replace an existing site where the landowner has now served a notice to quit the rental agreement. As part of Telefonica and Vodafone's continued network improvement program, there is a specific requirement for a radio base station to maintain its service and coverage within the selected network cell, which only can be within a short distance or placed as close to the installation. The new site will provide further 2G coverage and enhanced 3G coverage for Telefonica and Vodafone to improve overall capacity. The 3G coverage offered by the installation is key to day-to-day running of local businesses within the surrounding area. The site will be future-proofed, meaning that it will be capable of accommodating new, more advanced technologies when they come on stream. The new equipment is required to provide the additional frequencies and capacity to the site. The mast will provide services to customers of 2 operators adhering to the national MPPF and local telecommunication policies with regards to mast sharing. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, members? No. I'll move the recommendation from the chair. Did you second it?
I'll second it.
Seconded. Thank you. All those in favour? Anyone against? Ask the officer to confirm that, please.
The application is approved as per the committee report. Thank you.
Right, members, thank you all very much. Close the meeting.